Kirara is definitely the best of the stereotypical worst operators in the game. I feel a lot of her hate mainly comes from how weird she is to work with, and of course, Ethan. However, despite this, I still believe that Kirara is a pretty great operator and is genuinely a side grade to Ethan in certain situations. Kirara has two main roles, both of which take advantage of the Ambusher subclass traits and identity, and neither of which are crowd control. Firstly, as a lightning rod, and secondly, as an AoE arts DPS operator. As a lightning rod, Kirara takes heavy advantage of her subclass's trait, having a 50% physical and arts dodge, Kirara's HP being effectively doubled, going from 2209 HP to 4418 effective HP against physical and arts damage. On top of this, her defensive stats are pretty decent, at 300 defense and 30 resistance. Most importantly though, she has 0 block, which means you can just put her down anywhere and have her do her job. However, sometimes you can't do the same with other ambushers. Although they have defensive prowess, they will eventually fall after enough range damage. Kirara, on the other hand, has self-sustain with her talent, healing her for 2.5% of her max HP per second and 4.5% of her max HP per second if no one is in the surrounding 8 tiles of her. With 2209 HP, this heals her for about 55 HP per second and 88 HP per second respectively. However, again, Kirara's effective HP against arts and physical damage is basically doubled because of the Ambusher's trait, and so half the time she just isn't taking any damage, which buys her time to heal back up. So technically she has an effective healing of 110 HP per second and 176 HP per second. However, it is a bit semantically confusing to say that Kirara is healing at effectively 175 HP per second. During the time where she is dodging attacks, she isn't taking any damage, which gives her extra time to heal herself back up. So if only half of the shots she takes actually go through, but she heals for the entire duration, it's effectively the same as if her attacker were to be attacking at half of their normal attack rate, or if Kirara was healing at double her normal attack rate. The 1v1 interaction would be the same, but obviously time is important for some interactions in Arknights, so for the rest of the video I'll be referring to Kirara's healing by its normal values, not its effective values. Just keep in mind Kirara's an ambusher, she dodges half of her attacks that come her way, or well, on average she should. We've all been at the whims of ambusher RNG. When it comes to Kirara's skills, her S2 actively helps her out when it comes to assisting her lightning rod role. Right now, we'll ignore the damage part of her skill and just focus on the first effect. Kirara's talent gets tripled during uptime. This boosts her talent to 7.5% and 13.5% respectively, which increases Kirara's healing to 165 HP per second while surrounded, and an insane 265 HP per second when alone. Even though the uptime of the skill is only 8 seconds, Kirara is healing 13.5% of her max HP for each of those seconds while alone. So over the full duration, Kirara heals 108% of her max HP, which is a full heal. The uptime for the skill isn't that great at 21% with a 38-second cycle, but you can also look at it like a regeneration skill like what Cardigan, Matoi Mario, or Sidoroka have, where it's more about burst healing than it is about skill uptime. Since her skill uptime is an increase of 9% over the duration of 8 seconds, the skill itself heals Kirara for 72% of her max HP. This just so happens to be greater than Sidoroka's regeneration gamma at 70%. However, Sidoroka is almost half the cycle time of Kirara at 20 seconds, so even though the healing gain with Kirara's S2 is slightly better than Sidoroka, it doesn't come close to its cycle time. However, there is also the fact that Kirara does passively heal herself, something that Sidoroka can't do. Over the 30 seconds where Kirara isn't healing herself with her S2, she ends up healing 135% of her max HP while alone. So for a whole 38-second cycle, Kirara heals 135% plus 108% over the skill duration, for 243% of her max HP, or 6.4% of her max HP per second on average, which easily beats out Sidoroka's 3.5% max HP per second. So Kirara is a beast at keeping herself alive, which makes her great for tanking range damage. However, there is one pretty big issue. Kirara is an ambusher, and this stupid little line of text throws a lot of her lightning rod potential out the window. Is less likely to be targeted by enemies. For other ambushers like Ethan or Manticore, this is a good thing because it keeps them from taking too much damage. They're ambushers, they're meant to be sneaky and to kick your ass from deep into the front line. But Kirara's survivability is heavily designed into her self-restore, and so if you wanted to abuse that self-restore by making her a lightning rod, you couldn't have easily have done it as you could with Verdant, Bana, or Tequila. As long as there is some other operator in range of who you want Kirara to lightning rod, the enemy is just going to shoot them instead. This means that you can't use Kirara as a protective lightning rod, shielding your range attackers from range damage. Does this make Kirara useless as a lightning rod though? Not really. Kirara is really good at baiting out one-time effects, such as soaking up drone bombs, baiting out drones from tactical enemies from a walk in the dust, baiting out Sarkaz caster binds, taking Devon Evocator, fireballs, wasting ammo, taking control of gramophones, or just stalling out ranged enemies from outside of your operator's range. Kirara is a strong, independent gamer who don't need no medic. She can just exist on one side of the map and keep herself alive perfectly fine. As I referenced earlier in this video, Kirara is capable of being an AoE arts attacker, which... Wait, give me a second. Yeah, which most people probably don't believe. I blame this misconception most likely on a misunderstanding of how Kirara's skills work. Kirara's S1 is a 3-hit cycle crit, akin to another incredibly based operator. This crit itself deals an extra instance of damage equal to 150% of Kirara's attack. So in this case, 1245 arts damage on top of 830 physical damage, for a total of 2075 damage. This damage is the same as Jackie's S1 crit, being a 250% crit, except it's split between both physical and arts damage, which sounds pretty bad since it's both reduced by defense and resistance. Kirara doesn't get a physical damage boost, making it easier to damage threshold her physical damage. If Kirara was going up against an enemy with 800 defense, like a heavy defender, she deals 41 damage, because she ends up getting damage thresholded as 30 damage is less than 5% of her attack. She then deals 150% of her attack as arts damage, so she then deals 1245 damage for a total of 1286 damage. If she instead dealt all of her damage as just physical damage, she would deal 2075 damage minus the 800 defense for 1275 damage. Why is the physical only one slightly less? Because weirdly enough, her being damage thresholded gave her a slight boost of 11 damage. Does this actually make a difference and can be relied upon in game? No. But having added arts damage compared to just physical damage is a strict upgrade in her situation, since if she gets damage thresholded, she's guaranteed some arts damage. But if she doesn't get damage thresholded, then she's just doing more damage, as would be expected. What about enemies with high resistance? Shouldn't that also be an issue? Okay, let's look at Gorilla Shield Guard, a heavy defender variant with 1300 defense and 60 resistance. Kirara is getting damage thresholded here, so the physical damage side is only doing 41 damage. Her arts damage goes from 1245 damage to only 498, which comes out to be 539 damage in total. If she either did only physical damage or only arts damage, she'd be in a better position either way. So well, yeah, Game Press is correct. If an enemy has both high resistance and high defense, then Kirara, who deals both damage types, will be reduced by both defense and resistance. However, although Kirara does suffer when it comes to dealing with an enemy with both high resistance and defense, like most units would, she actually performs better given an enemy has either high defense or high resistance. As shown with the heavy defender, it doesn't matter how much defense the enemy has, she's guaranteed whatever arts damage she has. But with an enemy like a Gorilla Herald who has relatively high resistance compared to his defense, Kirara is capable of retaining her physical damage. And so, although her S1 would be better in certain situations if it was either purely physical or purely arts damage, what you instead have is an ability that kind of generally works against either enemies that you typically want to deal physical damage to, or enemies you typically want to deal arts damage to. Of course though, since Kirara deals far more arts damage and physical damage with her skill, she leans more favorably towards higher defense enemies with low resistance than higher resistance enemies with low defense. Of course though, Kirara just so happens to have a skill that deals just arts damage. So luckily, we have her S2, which is a skill with a higher than 250% modifier that deals purely arts damage. Although Kirara's S2 says that 100% of her attack is dealt as arts damage. Reading the operator also explains the operator. It also says every second, meaning that although her damage isn't increasing, it is being dealt at a much faster pace than her normal attacks. The ambusher's normal attack rate is 3.5 seconds. Kirara normally deals 237 physical damage per second, but on skill uptime, she deals 830 arts damage per second, which is a boost of, well, 350%. Over the full duration of this skill, Kirara deals 6400 arts damage to all enemies in her range, and then also fully heals herself. Listen, Kirara's S1 is okay, but her S2 just provides so much value that it is hard to really justify using her S1 over S2. The only time where I have unironically used her S1 over S2 is in integrated strategies with the Hand of Super Speed relic that gives 120 attack speed to ambushers. Since Kirara's S2 isn't boosted at all by that effect, her S1 ends up dealing more damage. Anyways, Kirara deals tons of damage and heals herself by a ton. Yeah, the uptime itself isn't really great, but the actual output of her S2 is high enough to justify it more as a burst skill. It's not small enough to really be a 6400 damage nuke on top of a nearly instantaneous full heal, but if its effect was spread out over a longer duration, Kirara would definitely take a hit in effectiveness. I do think Kirara is a pretty good operator. She's definitely a difficult to use operator that is sadly a bit counterproductive between her trait and her design. Having less aggro makes it more difficult to get value out of her tankiness, and her module trait change is weirdly Ambusher X rather than Ambusher Y. Ambusher X is designed for crowd control, but it's slow, where Kirara is clearly more focused on survivability, which Ambusher Y boosts slightly further with a bonus of 10% dodge chance. I mean, her slow can also help keep enemies in her range, allowing her S2 to deal more damage and also help enemies stay away from your other operators and instead stay focused on Kirara, but it's a stretch. And even then, I still feel that Ambusher Y would better suit her. If her talent also just gave her increased aggro, that would be amazing, truly. She doesn't need taunt, she doesn't need to be Mjolnir, but if she did just have neutral aggro at the least, then there's really nothing about her that could be considered bad. Comparing her to Ethan, I also think is quite silly, as neither of them are similar in the slightest. Ethan is far more focused on crowd control and is very, very busted at that. Both of them are just kind of different flavors of Ambusher. I like Kirara, I really, really do. I think she's definitely an overlooked operator that can tear stages in half with how crazy her survivability can be sometimes. Sometimes she can even just delete half the enemies on her own while taking sustained fire. Complete gamer move. She also has the upside of being an Aegir, who actually looks like the animal that she is supposed to be. How is Pure Stream supposed to be a dolphin or a manatee or whatever she is? I guess her hat? She's human to me. You cannot convince me that just wearing clothes that resemble an animal makes you that animal. And yes, this also counts for Skady. Anyways, that's it for me. I hope you all have a great day, and I love you all. Sometimes she can even delete half the enemies on her own while taking sustained fire. Complete gamer complete gamer move. Why did I write that in? Complete gamer move. She also... Okay. Sometimes she can even just delete half the enemies on her own while taking sustained fire. Complete gamer move. She also has the upside.